You ever get the feeling a huge nerf is coming? Necromancy's here, and somehow people got guides up onto YouTube within 24 hours. And someone got 99 within 36 hours. I don't know which is more surprising. I don't know which is more impressive. Knowing how the skill works is nice and all, and racing to the top of the high scores might be fun, but this is a new combat style, not just a new skill. It'll have some serious knock-on effects across the whole game. So here's the question, is it any good? Because Jagex outlined the rest of the year's content schedule, we know September will be the month of tweaks. Probably nerfs, but hey, balancing, right? I don't know what the breadth of the tweaks can be, or how deep Jagex is willing to go to rework parts of the skill, but I would like to take this time to outline the good and bad in what I hope is a balanced manner. We're introduced to the skill like most content in RuneScape, thematically and with a little bit of humor. We'll talk about the narrative a bit later, but I will point out that our player character's out of left field suggestion of consent-based necromancy was quintessentially RuneScape. There's something about that trope, experts and not seeing the obvious solution, that just tickles me. The introduction cinematic / cutscene thing they have going on there is something I'd love to see more of. The 2.5D animation is great. I've never seen one that isn't charming. So we're dropped into the skill rather quickly. We meet the main antagonist, have a vague idea of his goals, and are told the only way to stop him is by training the new skill. We're informed that the city of is barren and will need to conduct rituals to bring some of the dead back. It's here that we're taught about the non-combat portions of this combat skill. We perform rituals to fill the Well of Souls, a repository for dead people who can manifest physical forms, quote unquote, throughout the city. The amount of souls stored in the well also determines how many tiers of talents we can put talent points into. The important parts of the skill are outlined quite clearly with this introductory quest, and if you didn't realize that, it's because you spacebarred through all the dialogue. What I think is missing is the significance of ritual disturbances. When performing rituals, how high your soul attraction is will cause different events to occur, like wandering souls moving across the ritual site, or a shambling horror walking towards one of your glyphs. Successfully completing the disturbance, like clicking on the ghost or catching the death's head moth, rewards a decent chunk of XP. At first I assumed rituals were awful experience, basically just busy work, but when I began using alteration glyphs and started seeing more disturbances, I realized how much XP rituals can be worth. The actual XP you get from performing the ritual on its own is minute in comparison. It wasn't until 60 Necromancy that I learned this, because at this level, you unlock more glyph spots for your rituals. For lower level rituals, this means more alteration glyphs raising your soul attraction. I'm not saying low level rituals need to be as stacked with events, but it would have been nice if it were better outlined what mid and high level rituals would be like. Give us a taste of what's to come. Before level 60, rituals felt like busy work that awarded token XP just so you could use necromancy out in the world. Post 60, they didn't feel like that at all. There is a difficult balance to reach, however. A huge criticism I see across all games is how obnoxiously slow and long introductory segments are. Lots of hand-holding in the tutorials. It kills replayability. I'm looking at you, Pokemon. But at the same time, you don't want to leave the player completely in the dark. You can get away with it sometimes if the game's really good, but that's tough. It's usually safer to provide some guidance. What's great about Necromancy is that the tutorial is rather short. You can get started training and fighting soon after the first quest. But because it's so short, we can't get more explanation of upcoming content. Do you slow the player down and showcase stuff to create anticipation, or do you let them loose to discover it on their own? That's a tough question. Jagex seems to have gone with the latter. Fortunately, it doesn't take very long to get to that point where you realize how good the rituals actually are, so it's not that bad. As for the rituals themselves, they could use with a little bit of tweaking. First of all, pathing across the glyphs is all kinds of funky. Sometimes you'll walk across the ritual platform just fine to catch a wandering soul. Other times, you'll go to get the soul and you'll just stop. 2 steps away from the ritual skull and you just stop. The shambling horrors aren't very user-friendly either. The idea is to click on the horror and then click on the glyph it's walking toward. Do that before it reaches the glyph and you get a decent amount of XP and some ritual-related items like a bit of necroplasm or memento or bones. When you click the horror, the glyph you need to click is supposed to twinkle, but I don't know if it's because there are so many people in the area, but those sparkles might as well be invisible. I find myself clicking back and forth between the horror and the glyphs, hoping to guess the correct one before it gets to where it's going. The corrupted glyphs disturbance is fine. The only problem is the pathing sometimes and the force walk tiles. High attraction disturbances I can't speak on. I haven't seen them yet, but from the looks of it, you just have to spam click on them. I can't imagine them being all that bad. Mechanical issues aside, rituals are pretty good. If I had to make one design change, it would be to the ink. Right now, to make regular, greater, and powerful ink, you need to use 20 necroplasm of an equal tier with a vial of water and ashes, the regular ashes you get from fires. The only difference between the inks is the type of necroplasm you use, and that feels like a missed opportunity. Perhaps Jagex was trying to give regular ashes a use of some kind, but a more thematic approach would be to use demonic ashes. Bones play an important role in necromancy, acting as the primary focus of communion rituals. Bones are the remains of skeleton-having creatures, ashes are the remains of demons. Seems like a no-brainer. Impious ashes for the regular ink, accursed for greater, infernal for powerful. Hell, they could even let you use any kind of ash for it, from regular fire-spawned ashes to searing ashes. Ultimately, I don't think the bottleneck for ink should be ashes. Hey everyone, we released a brand new skill. Go check it out by going to the Abyss and killing abyssal creatures for hours and hours to collect ashes, because that's like 15 mil an hour right now. I was also gonna suggest removing vials of water from the ink recipe, since necroplasm is, I assume, some kind of a liquid to begin with, but then I thought about invention machines. Of course, we don't want necromancy machines. That'd be kind of strange. Actually, it would probably be totally in line with RuneScape itself. That's absurd, so why not? But let's not have invention necromancy for now. Let's not have undead robots. But how about this idea? Rituals that combine necroplasm, water, and ashes for you in large amounts. Personally, I love the gameplay loop of performing stronger rituals to create stronger necroplasm. I love the puzzle-like element of figuring out exactly how much of each ingredient you'll need to perform a certain number of rituals. I'm sure most people don't and would rather have a calculator. But what I don't love is having to abandon the ritual site and go back to a bank, because the site doesn't have a bank for some god-awful reason, to make a bunch of ink. It derails the loop. Perhaps a worry would be that the multiply glyphs would cause an overabundance of ink to enter the game, but then maybe for that ritual you just can't use multiply glyphs. Rather than the multiply glyph, we could use attraction glyphs and use the ritual to interact with a bunch of disturbances for a bunch of XP. That way, making ink feels like doing necromancy and not herblore. Ultimately, I want to do necromancy. I don't want a bank stand. I made 2,000 Elder Overloads. Stop making me do herblore. I'm sick of it. I'm probably not the best person to talk to about combat. I've got a decent amount of PVM experience, but I'm not a min-maxer. I'm not an optimizer. I don't even have the Reaper Crew achievement unlocked. I've never had it unlocked. So that's where the perspective of this review is coming from. With the other combat styles, I primarily play with Revolution and trigger thresholds and ultimates myself. Sometimes I'll click basic abilities if I notice the next ability in the Revolution cycle wouldn't be good. For instance, if Revolution throw out a greater concentrated blast and the next up is Combust. Combust doesn't crit, so I'd rather use something like Dragon Breath following a greater concentrated blast. But Necromancy is designed with the idea of not using Revolution, and it's also designed without the idea of thresholds and basic abilities. There are 3 resources we have, maybe 4, but definitely 3. Adrenaline, the resource we're all familiar with. A few Necromancy abilities build Adrenaline, but the primary builder is the auto attack, which, by default, automatically fires, even with Revolution off. The basic attack attacks. The second resource is Necrosis. It's a buff that stacks up to 12 times, and based on the number of stacks you have, other abilities are modified. For instance, every stack of Necrosis reduces the adrenaline cost of Finger of Death by 10%. With 6 stacks, Finger of Death costs nothing. The final resource is Residual Souls. Soul Sap generates 1 residual soul and 9% adrenaline. Spectral Scythe, which costs adrenaline, has a 25% chance to generate residual souls as well. With a single soul, you can cast Soul Strike, which binds and damages the primary target and does reduced splash damage to enemies near the target. With 2 or more souls, you can cast Volley of Souls. It does the same amount of damage as Soul Strike per soul, with the bind and AoE effect removed. This sounds complicated, but it works out pretty well. A big problem with other combat styles, melee is, I believe, the biggest victim of this without certain gearing options, is being adrenaline starved. It doesn't matter if you have a bunch of abilities off cooldown, without adrenaline, they're useless. My experience with Necromancy, which is mostly just killing her mod, is that you've always got some resource to spend and another resource to build. I haven't yet found myself with nothing to do. Not enough adrenaline? Well, I have 2 residual souls here, so I can cast Volley. No souls but plenty of adrenaline? Cast Scythe and fish for some procs. About to cap on adrenaline? Summon a ghost. We could argue that the 4th resource is summons, skeleton warriors, ghosts, and explodey zombies. Maybe that's a 4th resource, or maybe that's a utility thing, maybe it's just extra damage, I don't know. You could think of it as a resource. But even if you have absolutely nothing to do, everything's on cooldown, you have no resources, nothing at all, there's still the basic attack that builds up adrenaline. What's nice is that you don't need over 50% adrenaline to use abilities that cost adrenaline. Necromancy has no threshold abilities. Other combat styles show a little adrenaline icon in the abilities tooltip, and if it says 50%, that indicates it's a threshold ability, not that it costs 50% adrenaline. Thresholds only cost 15% adrenaline. You just need at least 50% adrenaline to use the ability. Necromancy is different. The tooltip says 20%, it costs 20%, and you can use it even if you only have 20%. The style is much less rigid than the other styles. I'm enjoying it. My only problem is adjusting to full manual, but I'm sure I'll get used to it eventually. It must be hard figuring out how to fill an entire combat style with enough gear so it feels comparable to the other styles which have had 2 decades worth of updates. I like the route they took, using the skill itself to upgrade gear for the skill. A big criticism I've seen is that no matter what piece of armor you put into the ensouled ritual, you get out the same number of cloth. A mystic robe top and mystic gloves both become a single piece of ensouled cloth. But the Necromancy armor requires differing amounts of cloth for each armor piece. Why did Jagex do this? I gave it a bit of thought, and here's my take on it. Honestly, we could probably just wait for a Q&A and ask them, but wild speculation is more fun. First, they probably didn't want the gear input to change how optimal the ritual is. If the robe top gave 3 pieces of cloth, then it makes performing the ritual with other pieces worse. Ink fuels rituals. If you're getting triple the output by sacrificing robe tops instead of gloves, then sacrificing the gloves is effectively triple the ink cost. Instead, what Jagex has done is made it so the only way to affect the output is by using multiply glyphs. Maybe it's a little clunky that way and not consistent with other parts of the game, but at least that means you can make necromancy armor with just gloves without wasting any supplies. This sounds bad for Ironman, but it's actually better because that means you don't need all pieces of subjugation armor. If you went dry on the gown top but have 10 gloves, you're fine. My biggest grievance is the power armor quests. To get tier 80 power armor, you need to kill the Queen Black Dragon with Necromancy 5 times. Simple enough. And you need to kill Nex with Necromancy 5 times. That second requirement is kinda rough. I get that the idea is to fight enemies that drop tier 80 to get tier 80, but it seems a bit steep. Maybe I'm kinda biased here considering I'm terrible at Nex, since I haven't been able to get a kill, but I think my concern is somewhat reasonable. Also, consider the requirements for the previous set of power armor. You only had to kill the giant mole and the Calphite Queen. This is trivial. That's like you might as well just AFK that. And compare this to the tier 80 tank armor. It only requires you killing the God Wars Dungeon 1 bosses once each, and a Slayer task. It's way easier. And looking ahead to the tier 90 armor, for tank armor we have 10 kills of each God Wars Dungeon 2 boss, a Tztok Jad kill, and 1 Soul Reaper task. It's not low level PVM, but it's still pretty easy PVM. For the tier 90 power armor, you have to kill Araxi, the Ambassador, and Virago, Telos, or Solak. Super imbalanced. Super imbalanced. And that's why I'm going for the tank armor, for now. A full set of tier 90 tank armor gives you a 10% chance to dodge incoming attacks. It doesn't provide us with extra damage, but a 10% chance to evade hits is pretty powerful in its own right. Since both paths unlock the ability to create that tier of weapon, the tank path is just a no-brainer because then you can make the tier 90 weapon. What I'm going to do is make the tier 90 tank armor and then use that armor to maybe go back and try to unlock the tier 80 and tier 90 power armors. Although the extra survivability is kinda nice. I guess if you're pushing for personal best times, you'd want the power armor, but if you're not, maybe the tank armor is perfectly fine. I haven't finished all the quests yet since the final quest requires 95 necromancy, the highest level any quest has ever required. Currently I'm sitting at 92, so I'll get there soon enough. What I have experienced so far has had me interested, but I'm nervous. The last character I've seen in a video game who wanted to break the cycle of life and death wasn't very good. Although at least we can't see Raziel's nipples. That might be a con for some of you. At least it seems Jagex has learned from Blizzard's mistakes and isn't forcing us to play this dumb game of cat and mouse with Raziel. There's mystery to him, but his plan is pretty explicit. If Necrovirus is anything to go by, Raziel is using us as an apprentice to learn something, likely at our own expense. Learn what? Who knows? Maybe that's explained in the final quest. I hope that's explained in the final quest. My biggest disappointment is during Vessel of the Harbinger. In the quest, Death tells us about Necromancer's vessels and how they use them to store souls. He mentions that we've previously dealt with at least one such Necromancer in their vessel, Necrovirus. I know Jagex doesn't want to lock a lot of content behind quests, but goddammit, what about Nomad? Nomad's Requiem was all about Nomad collecting souls to empower himself. If that throne he was sitting on wasn't a necromantic vessel, I don't know what is. That one issue aside, snubbing my boy, it's great to see a take on necromancy that isn't just not evil, but also isn't framed as an ends justifies the means kind of thing. You know the character, the one who's all, I perform evil magics to protect the innocent, oh balance, anti-hero bullshit. No. Here, we're more like a commander of an army of volunteers, not objectively evil, and we're not morally gray either. Although, I will say some of the tasks Killy gives us are kinda messed up. Perform a communion ritual X number of times? That's fine, bring in souls to Kill 150 monsters while on a slayer task, possibly an elf slayer task? Stealing the souls of elves to empower our weapons? I guess killing elves with reckless abandon is evil in and of itself, necromancy or not, but regardless of what you're killing stuff for the purpose of collecting their souls, that feels kinda evil. Good necromancy would use the naturally dead. At least that's my interpretation of good and evil. Although I guess if you murder someone and then they still consent to being in your army of undead, then maybe it's fine, but they might be afraid of you. They might feel coerced into it, which isn't really consent at that point. It just seems like it is, but it's not. It's still kinda evil. Anyway, so far, I'm having fun with the skill. It's still early days, so I don't think we've fully realized how much of an effect it's gonna have on the rest of the game, but I'm excited to see where it goes and how the style will change existing boss encounters. There's already a lot of content involved in the skill, with so much more room for it to be expanded upon. I can't wait to see what else Jagex has planned for it. If any of you have any tweaks you think would improve necromancy, throw them in the comments. I think at least one person at Jagex watches my videos from time to time, so maybe they'll see it. I don't know. Algorithm. Thanks for watching. And thank you to my channel members, listed in no particular order. I appreciate the support. If you would like to become a channel member, you can click the join button below and get access to various perks, such as chat emotes and chat badges. Take care, everyone.